So Blockbuster was like the primo like family affair thing that I mentioned earlier, right? But grocery stores also did rentals too, and so the Albertsons near my
Oh
family's
my
old
god, dude.
home, like no, but the kicker is they wouldn't be like Blockbuster quality as far as like the selection or whatnot, but like
Yeah,
they
yeah,
would carry all the old games, and so
yeah.
like for NES, you could rent an NES cartridge for 1 week for $1, and
Yeah,
then
that's what I was gonna say. The rates were much cheaper too. Yeah.
yeah. So that's why like we just rented a ton of NES games, and then after a while, when we got the SNES, we just rented a ton of SNES games, and so I never really bought an SNES
Yeah.
game. I had like I owned like 7 or 8, and yeah, I
Yeah,
just
the rates.
remember like it was $3 for the SNES, and I thought that was just insane at the time. And how the hell was I going to be able to convince my mom to rent me the game from the grocery store when it's tripled in price? You know.
Yeah.
Hello, hello, and welcome to the Absolute Guard podcast. We're a competitive fighting game community podcast examining history and current events from the lens of the Arizona grassroots scene.
Yes, welcome. This is episode 64. My name is Benny, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host John, who decided to change up the routine today, and it's kind of throwing him off.
Yeah, like we're debuting the shorter intro music, so now you don't have to skip ahead 30 seconds on each start. We're also recording this like a week or a day early because we're not doing it live. I forget why we're not doing it live this week, but it's the holidays, so things get crazy, right?
Yeah, I had some things I was trying to plan for tomorrow, and then I realized like I think tomorrow I don't even have the day off because my due days off are actually switching this week.
Oh,
So I
okay.
have some, yeah, I have some like weird split days off this week. Like I got Wednesday, Friday off, and then next week I'll have Thursday, Friday. And
Oh, what the
speaking of
hell?
Thursday, yeah, speaking of Thursday, Friday, we're actually gonna start doing our live shows on Thursday, right?
Oh, that's yeah. I was trying to figure that out. We didn't. For some reason, I thought we were switching to Monday, so we're going to be doing Thursdays now.
Yeah,
Then. Okay.
Thursdays. So
Okay.
that'll debut next week. Next Thursday, we're gonna be talking with King Hippo, aka Tanner, again. So you guys can look forward to that. I mean, kind of like stop talking about like who we had coming on and kind of just going off the cuff, but that's
Yeah.
one that you can look forward to for next week when we start on Thursdays.
Yep. I was trying to figure out when the schedule change would happen, but yeah, we've been. That's why we haven't done them live in the past couple episodes, I think.
Yeah,
So we'll be back to live on Thursdays.
yeah,
Same time though, right? Like 6 o'clock or 5 o'clock,
yeah.
Mountain
Five
Standard
o'clock.
Time.
Yeah, I just say Arizona time. Everybody else can figure it out.
Yeah, that's kind of who our audience is, right? If you're listening, you're
Yeah,
probably from Arizona.
yeah. So 5 o'clock Thursdays is what we're looking forward to. Yeah, my I don't know about you, but my last week has been pretty busy. Um, it's pretty fulfilling though because I got to visit with a lot of family and friends, and that was something I was really looking forward to and needed. Um, just Thanksgiving time, and I had a wedding that I attended on the previous Saturday. That was the 18th,
Oh.
and then I had planned to meet up. That was the third wedding. Yeah, that was three of three weddings for to close out the year. That was the last one we had to go to after yours. So no more weddings for the rest of the year unless somebody decides to have like a shotgun wedding between now and New Year's Eve, I guess. But we had that, and then yeah, I got to meet up with some basically my best friend's family last Tuesday. I thought his nephews were just in town. Turns out his whole family was in town. His older brother and his older sister, and that caught me by surprise. And I was like, "Oh, well, then I get to see everybody." And I hadn't seen everybody basically in I want to say 6 years since he got married, and
Wow.
that was 6 years ago to see like his whole family. So that was a good time. And then typical like Thanksgiving stuff. Got to see all the rest of the family and friends and stuff that we normally see. So yeah, been a pretty busy week. My sleep's kind of been all over the place.
Yeah, I imagine if you're used to working nights and then suddenly we're doing like holiday, like 9 to 5 hours more so, right?
Yep,
Um,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, how
My
was your Thanksgiving and stuff?
oh, it was good. It was good. I think that this was the first Thanksgiving that like we didn't have like a pressing thing to worry about.
Mm,
Like if anything, the pressing thing to worry about was last month for the wedding and getting all the family situated for that one. And so this looked pretty easy by comparison. And
yeah.
um, I guess the big complicating factor was like because we got married this year, like we wanted to make sure that we were at both families' Thanksgivings and both families'
Uh,
holidays, and oftentimes it's just a crapshoot on timing.
yep.
Like we're fortunate in that her family lives in Phoenix and my family has their Thanksgiving in Chandler.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's about like a 40-minute drive between both of the houses. So we went to uh, my family in Chandler for like an early like a 1 p.m. lunch, and then her family for like a 4 p.m. dinner. So it was a lot of like moving, a lot of driving, but it wasn't it wasn't as bad as we thought it was going to be. So like we might end up doing it again. I'm not sure yet.
Yeah.
Um, I know that my family like was really big on the karaoke setup that we had at the wedding. Um, and so I'm at Christmas. I'm probably gonna bust that out again for the family. So I now have a shtick for my family's holiday parties. Yeah,
Nice, nice. Yeah, it's like you bringing up that whole family dynamic thing after getting married. That's kind of something I wrestled with too after I first got married,
yeah,
because you said, you mentioned Phoenix and Chandler and like 40 minutes between. Like
yeah,
we literally lived in between both of our parents within like a 5-minute drive. And I think the toughest thing was mainly from my side, was my dad had a hard time kind of letting go and kind of understanding that I had another family, that, gatherings that I had to attend to.
yeah,
Like he was, like I talked about, or I brought up, you kind of changing up the routine, and like that was a real tough thing for him to deal with in the beginning, because it's like Thanksgiving, I was just like, "Are you coming here?"
yeah.
Christmas time, we'd go to like midnight mass, and then we'd come home, open gifts and stuff like that. And then like that first Christmas, he was like, "Are you guys coming with us?" And I was just like, no, I have another family to hang out with." And it really kind of like caused a little bit of a rift between us to start, but eventually we kind of all sorted it out. And once, I think it was, I feel like the main thing was just my dad. It was just like he had a hard time kind of letting go in a way, and just
That's
kind of realize,
fascinating. Yeah.
yeah,
I mean,
just
like
kind of,
I'm going through something similar with my family, so like it's cool
yeah,
to get your perspective to know that we're not alone there.
yeah.
Um,
Because they get expectations, right? Like they expect, oh, are you guys going to show up? And just like,
yeah,
well, I have this to do too, and
yeah. Yeah, to my
you kind of,
family's credit, like they were very much like, "Hey, we're gonna have Thanksgiving at this day at this time. We'd love for you to make it." And I was like, "What do you mean you'd love for me to make it? Why am I not gonna be there?" And then it was like, "Oh shoot, it's because they might think that if there's a conflict there." Um,
uh,
but like a lot of the I guess that's the benefit of getting married 3 weeks before Thanksgiving or 4 weeks before Thanksgiving is that a lot of the like, hey, I'm giving my son away to a different family or being like open to having to them experiencing a holiday with a different family. Like a lot of that happened at the wedding anyway.
yeah.
uh,
Yeah, family dynamics, man. Like, yeah, we got it sorted out. There was a time where kind of like we would alternate holidays. So, like, if I spent the majority of time at Thanksgiving one year with my parents, then the next year it's
mhm.
be like, oh no, we're doing it with her parents. And
Yep.
eventually, that kind of came to be the balance right there. It was just like, oh, well, we did this with you guys last year,
Yeah.
and then that was kind of a fair way. We'd still kind of come by and stop by, but it was for like, our time was a little bit more heavily weighted towards one or the other, depending on the year or whatever.
Yeah. It's tied to other people as well too. Like it's like, hey,
Mhm.
if all of your one side of the family is going to be able to make it and you're the only one that can't, and then you have
Yeah.
to coordinate that with people that the other family might not even be related to and not know anything about. It's just
Yeah.
there's a lot there.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
fun times though. I mean,
yeah,
eventually, like, yeah, I just tried not to let it stress me out, and like,
yeah.
just kind of trying to go forward from there.
That's what caught me off guard about this holiday was like traveling because I unwittingly said yes to both sets of parents, and at that point you can't. I'm running away from the thing that you just talked about, which is like I didn't want to disappoint either set of parents by saying
Yep.
we're not going to be there. Um, and so I was expecting this to be an extremely stressful endeavor, but by and large, it was. The drive itself wasn't bad, and yeah, we ate a lot of food, but I don't know, like there wasn't any kind of tension or rift or anything like that.
Yeah.
And The last couple of Thanksgivings, I think, have been a little bit more volatile, just for a variety of different reasons, pandemic related as well.
Yeah.
And so it's like this Thanksgiving just went very very smoothly. Nothing went wrong. Everybody was super happy to see each other. There wasn't any
Yeah.
issues with availability. My sister couldn't even make it in from Texas, and that was a bummer. But like we weren't torn up about it, you know.
Yeah.
And I guess it's also like it's a preview for Christmas too, because like
Yep.
we're gonna see them all in a month anyway. This is the time of the year you see your family the most, right?
Yep. Pretty much,
Two
yeah.
months in a
Usually this
row.
time. Yeah. Yeah. It's like I don't know. It's just, like I said, just try to keep it stress free, and then at the end of the day, like it's it's supposed to be a good time. So like try to keep it simple and keep it at that. And
Yeah,
now it's not like you said, you're gonna see family a lot. Like why make it a stressful or even like a hostile time? It's like we should be happy at these times.
agree, agree.
Yeah,
And I
but
think that's just been a general topic for the whole world lately, is just trying to figure out ways to come together and not hate on
yeah.
each other.
Yeah, it's like so I was talking to you earlier about the fact that because it's episode 64, and for me,
Yeah,
like whenever I think of 64, my mind automatically travels to like Nintendo 64 and N64, whatever you want to call it, Ultra 64. And it got me thinking about like just old fighting games in general, not just for the N64, but just the SNES and stuff like that.
yeah,
And I was kind of interested in kind of your background with, I guess, older fighting games that weren't kind of like Street Fighter.
sure, yeah.
Because everybody's like, yeah, I played Street Fighter 2, and I was just like, yeah, I feel like everybody played Street Fighter 2. But what about some like other like obscure games and stuff that you played, like regardless of like system?
Yeah, because like we always talk about stuff being in the competitive lens, right? Or like Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat or Killer Instinct or Tekken, like they're gonna be from the competitive side, but like there's been a ton of games out there that we just haven't like ever like they might not be good fighting games, like good balance wise and all the mechanic breakdowns and stuff like that, but like they come at unique times in our lives and have their own sense of nostalgia. Um
Yeah,
like I think that I didn't grow up playing Street Fighter 2, and it might just be because I didn't go to arcades as a kid.
yeah,
So a lot of my first fighting game interactions uh, on consoles and whatnot were actually pretty poor. I thought that most of the fighting games I played were ass, and now I
yeah.
know, like with the benefit of hindsight, I'm like now I know that they were ass because these are the good ones.
Yeah.
The competitive ones are the good.
The ones
um,
that stood the test of time, right? The ones that lasted.
yeah, yeah. So I guess to kick it off, like for N64, I guess the first one I remember is Spider's Destiny.
Yep.
I don't know if you
That
got a chance to ever play that one.
I rented that game a lot. I think I owned it later, but like, yeah, I remember renting that from Blockbuster back in the day, and
Yeah, we're in the
that was
rental
like,
era too, right?
yeah, yeah. So it was like, I just remember because the thing that stuck out about that game was that it was based on like a point system. Like
Yes.
you had like if you had a knockdown or whatever, I forget what the point system was, but like you'd get 2 points for this, or a ring out
Yeah.
would be this, and stuff like that, and like you'd have to get, I think it was 7 points to
Yep.
win. And that's what really kind of stuck out to me about that game at the time. Like there was a whole different kind of scoring aspect instead of just like beat down the vitality out of this guy.
Yeah. It's a different win condition, and you could like segment out your win condition, and that'll affect your Yomi in a lot of ways. Like if I know that this guy is trying to beat me by throwing me out of the ring because he only needs 3 points as opposed to four, like or
Yeah,
whatever the values, but I don't remember them off the top of my head. Like it changes the mind games, which I'm saying that from a competitive lens, but I didn't play that shit
yeah.
competitively. I was too young to even really
Nah,
understand
nah.
what that meant. I just remember being like, hey, if I don't need to, if it's seven to win and it's four for a ring out, and I only need 3 points to win, I don't need to fully KO them. I can just go for a ring out instead, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can go for something alternative. Yeah,
Yeah. And otherwise, it was like a Tekken Soul. It was actually more like Soul Calibur to me because it had ring outs, and it was a 3D game. Uh, it wasn't particularly good. Um,
yeah. I don't know if I would consider it like good, but like as a kid, like man, I had a lot of fun playing that game. The
yeah,
first one, I remember there was like a sequel that came out too. Like I don't know if that was as well received or what,
mm,
but like yeah, I don't. I don't even barely remember touching that at all, or yeah, seeing it very often anywhere.
Sure.
Yeah, and then
Um,
like I was gonna say, did you have any experience like playing like any SNES or like Genesis fighting game stuff at all? I mean, I know that was a lot earlier, actually, a lot earlier.
nah, I think the kicker is I didn't really own an SNES until really late in the console life cycle. And I didn't like I owned maybe like 7 SNES games total, and I don't think any of them were none of them were Street Fighter 2 even.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I could probably cover the N64 era for you, but I think what's a good SNES one that you remember or
Well, I mean,
Genesis?
other than Street Fighter 2, the one that always kind of stands out to me was Killer Instinct. I mean, I think we talked to Scott about this too. Like the port itself was kind of crap, but you know,
Ah, yeah.
as a I mean, that was around the arcade era, so it's just like that was the big thing with Killer Instinct because it was promoting the N64, right? The Ultra 64 was what you'd always hear like when you were in the arcade around that Killer Instinct cab. But then they put it on the SNES, and like the combo system, you know, was basically intact from what I understood at the time. Like, you know, I know Scott was much more into that game, so I don't know if there was things that were like mechanically changed or anything like that. But you know, the same kind of like linkers and the combo breakers and stuff like that were all present in that. And
Oh,
then that
cool.
was back in 95. Man,
Yeah,
that was a
because
long.
that's the one that they re-released on N64 under KI Gold, right? I think I remember seeing KI
Uh,
Gold
I think
somewhere in a
I think
Nintendo
KI Gold
Power
was.
ad.
I think that was supposed to be. I think that was two, if I'm not mistaken. That was already
Oh,
two.
oh, okay, my bad.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So
Okay.
yeah, two was a much different game. But yeah, I remember that coming out and like I wasn't really as into that game. Like I'd see it at the arcades here and there and give it a shot, but I wasn't really into that game at all.
Hmm.
But like I don't know, when I think of like, you know, like I said, everybody played Street Fighter 2, right? But then
Mhm.
like you saw all these kind of like clones like fighting, like even like down to like the character designs and stuff like that.
Oh
Um
yeah, yeah. Everybody had a Ryu-like character. Everybody had
Yeah, they had
a
the, like, the Japanese guy, right? And then they had, like, the
yeah.
American guy.
Even Fighter's Destiny had that, right? Like they
Yeah,
had
yeah.
a Guile and a Ryu ripoff, and then there's just usually a ninja. Usually,
Yeah, there's yeah, ninjas thrown in there, then you gotta throw in, like, a one female character for sure.
yeah. TNA as well.
Yeah.
Usually in that era, TNA was pretty common. um, yeah,
Yeah, I'm trying to think of other stuff because, like, I know there's other fighting games, besides that. I know, um,
I
there's one
got
that
another
was
one.
really.
If you're, yeah.
Oh, go
Do you remember Clay Fighter 63 and a third?
ahead. Yeah, yeah, that was, like I think the original Clay Fighter was on SNES too.
Oh, there we go. Original Generations again. Did you play the
Yeah.
original?
I think I rented that. Man, I need to look that up now. Yeah, I think I rented that, but like I wasn't other than the like you know, at the time a lot of it was like the mocap stuff, right? It was
Yeah.
like or I guess I don't, this game wasn't really mocap. It was the what's it called? Stop animation. Is that what it's called?
Oh, stop motion? Yeah, yeah. It was
Stop
made to
motion, yeah,
look
yeah.
like one of those like uh Rudolph Christmas movies or this Frosty the Snowman
Yeah.
Christmas movies.
Yeah,
And there's a
exactly.
character called Bad Mr. Frosty in it. I think he's the main character too. He's the
Yeah.
Ryu.
I think there you go. There's a costume idea for Ryu.
Yeah.
Like, what's the inspiration for this? I just remember, like, yeah, I just remember the characters, like you said, like Bad Mr. Frosty. They had the taffy guy.
Yeah, Laffy
Um,
Taffy. Do you remember HoboCop?
HoboCop. Oh, that's from the 64 one, isn't it?
Yeah, he's from the
Yeah,
64. Well, so you mentioned that you rented a couple of these games, right? And
yeah.
I think that it was either Clay Fighter or one of the other ones or both. That it was a Blockbuster exclusive. Like there was a Clay Fighter 63 and a third, and then there was
Oh, really?
I think it was called Sculptor's Cut, or there was like a re-release of it with extra cut content, and HoboCop was one of them. I think.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, I was actually just
Yeah,
looking at that right now. An
and the
updated
kicker about
version.
that, yeah, the sculptor's cut though was not released uh in retail stores. It was released in Blockbuster only as a Blockbuster
Yeah,
rental exclusive.
yeah. Oh, dang. I
Yeah,
didn't know that. That I had no idea that that was like that was it was that exclusive because I'm looking at it now and it says, yeah, since it didn't receive wide distribution, it's one of the
Yeah.
rarest and most valuable N64 games. That's crazy.
Yeah, the other one that I know of that was a Blockbuster exclusive, which is coincidentally also a bad fighting game, is it was the Beast Wars one. Uh,
Beast Wars,
yeah,
Transformers.
it was a Beast Wars Transformers fighting game, and you could like transform into like uh the vehicle mode because this was like in the Transmetals era, so like they
Yeah.
were in the season 2 designs essentially, and you could transform into the vehicle, you could fight as an animal, and you could fight as a robot. And I think you had it for the game forced you to like rotate between the three forms because
Ah,
with like energy bars, so
yeah,
that was
that's
pretty
just great.
cool.
That's crazy to think about because I was the Clay Fighter one that you're talking about, the exclusive. They said it was released in '98, so that was 25 years ago. So that
Oh
like
jeez, yeah.
one that speaks to. I mean, not just not just thinking about how long ago it was, but it speaks to like how big Blockbuster was at the time. Because
Yeah.
for your game to be a rental exclusive, like that's super exclusive. Like, I mean, I don't know about the details for regarding that, but it's just like maybe they had budget problems. I don't know. Maybe Blockbuster forked out some extra money and was like, "Hey, we only want this to be available in our stores," and kind of force people to come here.
It sounds a lot like streaming services, doesn't it?
Looks like you got kind of cut out. Oh, was
Oh,
that you?
sorry. Yeah, I think I'm back. Can you hear me?
You still there, John?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're kind of like breaking up.
Okay, yeah, that might be my connection. So I'll keep recording right now, but then let me mark down at 20, 22 or 20 or 22, 21, 30 or so. We need to cut
Yeah,
this part out.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Because I
Can you,
remember
yeah,
like,
your video feed's back. I think I'm back now too. So do you want to just keep going?
yeah, yeah, yeah. So
Okay.
yeah, I mean, I don't know. It just speaks to like the era of Blockbuster at the time because for the younger people that listen to our podcast, like you know, Friday nights, you go to a Blockbuster and pick out some movies to rent, pick out games to rent, and it was a much different time than it is nowadays. And it's just
It
like,
was essentially like a family affair because he would do it in
mhm,
batches, right? And so you would
yeah,
go with your entire family, and everybody would pick something they would want.
yeah.
And then eventually you'd have to whittle it down because somebody would come back with like 10 things, right?
Yeah,
And
you got to
then
pick one. Pick
yeah,
one
you
of
got to pick
these.
one. Yeah, or you have to
Yeah,
share with your sister or your brother, right?
yeah. I think
And
that
then
I mean, now that I think about it, like that was my exposure to a lot of other games. Because like as a kid, I'd get like if I was gonna get a game bought for me by my dad or my mom, right? It was like
yeah,
once a quarter, and I would learn that game inside and out, whatever game it was, and I would hope that it was good. Like I'd make sure I'd be looking through like magazine reviews and stuff, and make sure that this is what I want like to own. But then when it
yeah,
came to like playing those kind of obscure games or things on the side, like Blockbuster was my outlet to do that because it was whatever $6 or whatever it was to rent a game for like 5 days, and it's just like
yeah.
I get that'd be enough for my parents to be like, all right, well, you can rent this or whatever, and like either I liked it or not, or the next week would come and be like, hey, I want to get this again, and it's basically just a way for me to play other things.
You're making me remember my childhood here because, like, earlier I mentioned like why we didn't have a console. We had a Super NES really late into the console life cycle, right? And
Hmm.
I couldn't really figure out why, like, while we were talking about it. And I think I just realized it. It's because we had so Blockbuster was like the primo like family affair thing that I mentioned earlier, right? But grocery stores also did rentals too, and so the Albertsons near my
Oh
family's
my
old
god, dude!
home, like no, but the kicker is they wouldn't be like Blockbuster quality as far as like the selection or whatnot, but like
Yeah,
they
yeah,
would carry all the old games, and so
yeah,
like for NES you could rent an NES cartridge for 1 week for $1, and
yeah.
then
That's what I was gonna say. The rates were much cheaper too. Yeah,
yeah. So that's why like we just rented a ton of NES games, and then after a while, when we got the SNES, we just rented a ton of SNES games, and so I never really bought an SNES
yeah,
game. I had like I owned like 7 or 8, and yeah, I
yeah.
just
That makes
remember like it was $3 for the SNES, and I thought that was just insane at the time, and how the hell was I going to be able to convince my mom to rent me the game from the grocery store when it's tripled in price, you know?
Yeah, man, I completely like forgot all about that stuff because like there was a Cars, well, it's like Cars Safeway, like they merged with Safeway like years later, but
Yeah.
there was a grocery store called Cars that I lived nearby, and that that's where we'd go all the time. That was the closest place for groceries, and like I remember they had a video section and they had a small game section, and like you said, like the selection wasn't as good, but it was cheaper, so it was like
Yeah.
even if it was like something that again, that'd be a place to get kind of obscure stuff because like we'd grab a couple movies and it'd be like, hey, I guess I'll give this a shot, you know, and try out some game for cheap.
And then
Oh man,
I think it was around like DVD era when VHS was starting to get phased out for DVD. You just started seeing less rentals in general at the grocery stores. I think it's because Blockbuster and Hollywood Video were taking over a little bit more, and then they died.
yeah,
The
yeah,
Netflix killed them like a decade later.
yeah. That's man. I remember with DVDs, man. It's making me think about all kinds of stuff now. Like when DVDs first came out, and people were like, "You don't have to rewind these, and you can jump to the menu. You don't have to watch all these stupid previews."
Yeah, you know what? We start every episode by talking about like introducing our guests, and we clearly don't have a guest today. So I just wanted to like let all of our listeners know like we're talking about like Benny's like this reminds me of everything. We're talking about everything. This is our Thanksgiving
Yeah.
leftovers episode. So that's funny too because I introduced the podcast as the competitive fighting game community podcast. That's a new thing, but oh well. We're talking about grocery stores now.
Yeah, renting video games from grocery stores.
And
Man,
Blockbuster
just
too.
yeah, Blockbuster. Man, it's like so much stuff I'm just thinking about. Yeah, like I said, when I think of the 64, man, like I just started reminiscing about consoles and stuff like that because like
Yeah.
I had my one of my best friends growing up, like yeah, I had the NES, the SNES, and the N64. I didn't have any other consoles up until about like 2000. And he's the one that had like the Genesis, and then he had the PlayStation, and then he had all the other stuff. So like we'd take turns going to each other's houses and playing games, and like I don't know, it makes me think like what was that one game on the Genesis we played? Um, what's it called? I think it was Eternal Champions. Man,
Oh, that
that's an older
sounds
game.
familiar. Actually, I think I've heard of that.
Yeah, I remember like there was a time when we would just like play, we would just play against each other all the time, right? And then
Sure.
I think we figured out like kind of like stage fatalities in that game, and then all of a sudden it was just like, how do we do these like stage fatalities?
Yeah.
Like I remember like a fan in the background in one level and stuff like that. So we'd be like purposely just playing for real, and then like all of a sudden it's just like, all right, let me do this.
Yeah. I mean, that's in a lot of ways that's what fighting games are to the vast majority of people. Is that like they're a here's a cool thing, and I want to try to do that cool thing, and it's like that cool thing could even be. It could be a special move. It could be a cinematic move. It could be a stage finisher. It could be all these different. It's all always about like trying to recreate those scenarios so you could execute the cool move, right?
Yeah, I just happened to look that up. That's actually on Steam for 99 cents.
Oh man, you're going. Yeah, yeah. It's a lot of those Genesis games are on PC emulation nowadays, huh?
I may
Yeah.
need to go buy that. Just
Oh man.
play with my son. Be like, hey, this is what I was playing in fucking like the 90s, man. Holy crap.
You know, I again not super fighting game related, but like I've been on a kind of nostalgia gaming kick the past
Mhm.
couple of weeks. I think. Uh, I think it was 2 weeks ago, right? Super Mario RPG remake came out, and
Yeah,
that's a game that I've been playing. I play it like once every, maybe not once a year, but like once every 2 years. Just like I busted out the SNES, or I buy it. I think I bought it on the Virtual Console for the Wii, so I busted out the Wii one year. Um,
yeah,
and I just replay that game all the time because it's like a comfort game. It's a really quick game. I know how to play it really well. I know where all the secrets are, but it's
yeah,
also just really enjoyable to revisit every couple of years. So to have it remade, I basically just did my usual run and ran through it again, but just this time fancier and with the remake. And it's very good. I will say anyone who's interested in the remake, like they're it's not Final Fantasy VII remake. You're
yeah. I
not
saw that.
gonna. it's not a brand new game like FS7 Remake actually is. Like there's stuff I don't even want to spoil either game. So yeah, that's where I'll go. So after that, I bought Mario Wonder, and then I got distracted by the Pokemon trading card game, which was on the Virtual Console on the Switch. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the Pokemon trading card game for Game Boy, like my wife wasn't, it's basically an RPG where you play cards and you get to you build Pokemon card decks and you like travel to different gyms and win uh, card games. So it's like Pokemon, but without a lot of the filler. Like having to
Okay.
walk to and from each town or each gym, and it's replaced by it's replaced with building decks, which I like doing. So it was like the original. Um, have you ever played Inscription?
Description. I have
It's
not.
a newer roguelike deck builder game called. It's a horror themed game, but
Uh,
it's weird because it's got this really like dark atmosphere, but the game is basically Pokemon trading card game. It's like a homage to it. The second act is so like it was on my mind already, and then I bought like or then uh I got went a step further and I got some extra uh tips on how to get acquire Pokemon Trading Card Game 2, which is a Japanese only release with a fan translation, and I ran through that and it's really good. So I have been hella nostalgia gaming lately, so I can relate to you
yeah.
a little bit there.
Nice, nice. Like, I mean, personally, like, I haven't been playing. I mean, other than the time that I was playing Street Fighter Six, like, I really like. I've been wanting to play other things. Like, I don't know. I just I'm worried about kind of like getting into something, just because like I'm busy doing like the flight school stuff right now. So it's just like I
Yeah.
don't want to like jump into something because like I played Street Fighter Six for the first time in a couple days, like yesterday, and then next thing I know, it was like almost 2 hours later, and I'm just like, I should have stopped like an hour ago. I was like, damn
Ah,
it.
yeah, I feel like
So
when the game came out, it was brand new. We were like, you know what? We'll just put in the extra hours. It's too fun. But now the responsibilities of life are catching up, right?
yeah,
So now we're
yeah,
like, okay, I guess I won't play for the entire night.
yeah. I don't know. I think I just need to discipline myself and just just be better about that. I talk to my son about that all the time. Like play an hour here and then go do something else, like clean the house up or whatever, and then come back and play. Like I
Yeah,
need to do stuff like that, or just treat it kind of like a reward. Like do this much of schoolwork or whatever. Review
yeah.
this stuff for like an hour, and then give myself some leisure time and play that way.
I mean, I've seen people do that with push-ups too. Like they'll play a little
Yeah,
bit and then work out, and then play a little bit and then work
yeah.
out.
I see people
Like,
punish themselves all the time doing that. Like if I lose, I got to do 20 push-ups.
oh yeah, I wouldn't go that far, but like there is a like a degree of like, hey, we just make it a routine.
Yeah,
So then you don't think about it as an activity that's taking up your time. It's just more of like, hey, this is something that I'm doing. Like the podcast is a good example for us, right? Where it's like,
yeah,
this is something that's going to happen once a week. We do vary it sometimes, like today, but fundamentally, it always happens, and so we plan
yeah.
around it. And then you end up magically finding the time for it, as opposed to Street Fighter, where it's like, well, I'll play it some other time, and then you never fucking do, right? That's where I'm at. I haven't really played it seriously since Evo, and like I've just been
Yeah.
screwing around for the past couple of months. No, realistically, I've been we got married, so that's my actual reason. Um,
No, that's fair enough. Yeah,
yeah,
it's like I think the other thing with I was thinking about also when I was thinking about all the old consoles and stuff like that is like um when I was looking up some stuff about like best fighting games on this console or whatever, right? A
yeah.
lot of times like things that get the other genre that gets categorized into that is like the beat 'em ups, like
Oh yeah,
Double
yeah.
Dragon, or what was that other game? Combat Tribes. Like I've seen stuff like the Final Fight. Like people will put that in the fighting game category, and I'm just like, that's not a fighting game.
Oh man, are you talking about the Game Awards? Like
Well, no,
you
just
like last year there was that kerfuffle about best. The award wasn't called best fighting game. The award was called best fighting, and then
oh
they put like beat 'em ups or like Devil May Cry like games into that category, and then
yeah,
like like I think Smash Ultimate or something was in there, and of course it won. There was like an easy or Mortal Kombat or there's some like heavy hitter that was in there that clearly won.
yeah.
Um, it might even have been Multiverses. I think Multiverses won Game of the Year, and that didn't turn out so hot.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't really follow those like Game Awards. Man, Multiverses was the one that had like Batman and Shaggy and stuff in it, right?
Yeah,
Is that the game?
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, their unique spin on it was that it came out, everybody was hyped about it, then everybody dropped it because we moved on to the next thing, and
Yeah.
then they said, "Thanks for participating in our open beta test, guys. We'll let you know when the full release happens." And they took
Oh,
the
that's
game
right.
down. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it wasn't like with Rumbleverse where it was very clearly like, hey, there's business reasons that we have to cancel the game and the studio's still alive. This was just like, hey, this was just an open beta, and I think people were really pissed about that because a lot of them paid money for it. They like the
Yeah.
game took their money, and it seems a little shady because it's like, hey, this is you never told us there was a closed beta. This is like a weird like way to shut the game down and then maybe bring it back later and make people rebuy it or something. Like
Yeah.
like it strikes me as like there's some VC stuff involved, but I don't even know if that's actually true if it's a Warner Brothers game. So who knows?
Uh yeah, I don't know. Just like I don't know. Yeah, I always find it funny when people like categorize the beat 'em ups and stuff as fighting games. Cause like I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, they're fighting. I mean, but it's not the same thing. Cause I think I mean sometimes there's been branches off of or spin-offs. Like I think Double Dragon had a fighting game. What was it? Double Dragon V or 5? I don't know if they called it 5. I think that was a an SNES game.
Yeah.
And it was like a more traditional fighting game kind of thing. But I think like I don't know. I mean, there are beat 'em ups that are like more advanced. Like I don't know if you've ever played. Have you played Fight and Rage?
No, I
No.
don't think
Okay, so
so.
that's on Steam. Like I remember going to TGZ one time, and like somebody was playing it at one of the stations, right? And I was like really
Okay.
kind of like captivated by it, and I was like watching it because it's like it's obvious it's a beat 'em up, right? You could see the scrolling action and all like that, the multiple enemies, but then they were doing like these like crazy looking combos. Like if you played Final Fight, it's like mash attack and he does an auto combo, right? That's literally the game, right? It's nothing special. You could walk up and grab people, stuff like that, but there's nothing like super advanced.
Hmm.
And then yeah, like Fight and Rage, like I ended up like trying to remember like what it looked like. I didn't, I was a little too shy to like ask like what they were playing or whatever. And then I found it on Steam, and like there's like a whole like there's a lot of depth into that game, like a juggle system and everything. They have a like a trial mode or like a combo trial mode where they kind of like put you in a ring and they're like, here, do this combo. And it's like fighting game motions. Like you gotta hit somebody off a wall, and then there's like quarter circle motions and stuff like that. And I'm just like, yo, this is pretty fun.
Yeah. I it's it's always interesting like having those games that are like they're clearly not very developed, but then you just find that gem that's like suddenly really deep and it might
Yeah.
still have some rough edges, but like I don't know. That's different than like bells and whistles like cinematics and stuff because I think a lot of fighting
Yeah.
games went that direction where they just were like, okay, we need to go more bells and whistles and more cinematics like Mortal Kombat versus DC Universe or something, right? Um,
Yeah.
and I don't know. I not to just randomly throw shade at an obscure Mortal Kombat game, but um, what was my point? Oh yeah, I was thinking about Dragon Ball. It was Dragon Ball. It might have just been called Dragon Ball Z. Like there was a like or Dragon Ball the Fighters or something. It was a game that like it was a 3D fighting game, like a Tekken style fighting game, but it had like really really deep mechanics to it, which were very different than normal Dragon Ball fighting games, which are kind of like beat 'em ups realistically.
Yeah.
Um, but apparently the fan base found that it was too hard to play and people didn't like people still play it competitively today. Like you'll find like a random Japanese stream of that tournament going on, you'll see it on Will It Kill
Yeah.
even. um but it was it was very poorly received because it was too hard. And so you have like this unique problem where like the game has to be accessible enough for Dragon Ball fans, but it has to be interesting enough for fighting game fans. And that's what makes the
Yeah.
Dragon Ball Fighters released by Arxis and Bandai Namco so strong.
Yeah.
But one of the predecessors to that or precursors to that was this Dragon Ball game I'm talking about. I think it was called The Fighters.
Okay. Yeah, it's like
No,
no.
no, it
Now
wasn't.
that you bring up the Dragon Ball, fighters or Fighter Z or whatever people call it.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, like I've seen something recently in terms of like the anime fighting games because that's the first one like that had a kind of like a license to it, I think, and was adapted by ArcSys into like a traditional fighting game, right?
yeah,
Like typically when it comes to anime and they say, "Oh, we're gonna make a fighting game," it's one of
yeah,
those 3D arena ones, like
yeah. Do you
the
consider
you
arena battlers fighting games?
I don't know, like, we like, the only one, like I've seen, various ones like Kill la Kill and,
Yeah,
the Naruto
Kill-
games are notorious for that, right? Like, those have been how those games are. Like,
Ultimate
we
Ninja
bought the,
Storm, right? Yeah.
yeah, 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 Ninja Storm, we bought, like, the Demon Slayer one, like, we have that on Steam, but, like, you know, me and my son were playing that, but then I'm just like, "Ah, man, like, this would've been so cool if it was, like, a 2D fighting game," but it's just, like, one of these kinda generic arena ones, and, like, I'm seeing a lot of pushback from stuff I've seen on social media about that because they released I don't wanna say it wasn't Demon Slayer, there was a recent anime one that was coming out, and then they showed it. I think it was, I forgot the name, but it's, what's the acronym? JJK? Um, oh, man,
J.K.
I watched
Rowling?
no,
Oh, Jujutsu Kaisen or whatever.
oh, yeah, that's the one. Yeah, yeah. I think that's the one that they're making that into an arena fighter as well. And like, I remember, people were looking forward to seeing what it looked like, and then sure enough, it's the 3D behind the view, and they're just like, "Oh man, another one of these! Like, come on, you guys got to stop making this crap, right? Like,
Yeah,
give us another Dragon Ball Fighters."
because
And
the
like,
Kill la Kill one that you mentioned earlier was published by Arc System Works, and so Kill la Kill fans like myself were so excited because we're like, Arc Sys is making a Kill la Kill fighting game. Fuck yeah!
yeah,
And then Arena Battler. Yep.
yeah, it was just like, so it's kind of funny you bring up the thing about the accessibility because like most people when they see 2D fighting games, like they're not super accessible, right?
Right.
Like that's not
Right.
that's it's more complex. But then like these arena fighters, like you said, they're more cinematic type stuff.
Yeah.
And I guess that appeals more to like the kind of casuals and whatnot. And it's not what we want. I just man, when you talk about that Kill la Kill game, all I remember is G loaded that up on the Switch or something, and we were playing it, and I got hit by some like move where it looked like literally it looked like well, it looked like the guy's penis like stuck out. Like it was a robot move and like it just came out and I was just like, "What is this? And why did
Oh
I
yeah,
just
that's
die to this?"
important. Yeah. Oh, was it a big battleship? Or
I don't know.
did he turn into a mummy and have a bunch of whips and like a little thing in his mouth?
I don't remember. I remember I posted it. I posted it on Instagram or something because I was laughing so hard about it when he did that, and I was like, "What is this move?" And he like just thrust it at me, and then this huge metal appendage just comes out, and I'm like, "What?"
Yep, that sounds like Gamagori. I think honestly, man, that show is so cool because there's a lot of dicks and there's a lot of TNA. I keep talking about TNA, and it's on purpose because the word fascism, written in Japanese, starts with the same letters as the word fashion. You say fascio and fascio, like so. It's like they literally mashed together how fashion and fascism could correlate together, and the freedom of being nude. So that show is my favorite
Wow,
anime of all time, and it's the show that
interesting.
I tell people that my favorite anime is the Gurren Lagann show that Studio Trigger's known for, or the people are known for, and
Mhm.
but my real favorite one's Kill la Kill. Kill la Kill is a great
That's
show.
I'll
It's
see that
so good,
that
dude.
that puts that whole sequence into a little bit better perspective because I'm not super huge into anime, but like, yeah,
Yeah.
that whole that whole sequence and the way that I got hit by it, I was like, it just kind of like it literally like I rolled back in my seat or whatever I was doing at the time, and I'm just like, what is this?
Yeah. And for people who don't know what Kill la Kill is, the guys who made or the guys and gals who made the Cyberpunk anime that's on Netflix that everybody blew their loads over last summer, that one is it's the same studio or the same artists and storyline directors and everybody else working on they did Kill la Kill before that. And they did a couple other big ones too.
Oh,
But Kill la Kill is my favorite.
nice. I might have to look into that. I don't know.
Studio Trigger.
I'll
Yeah.
add it to my backlog of things that I may never watch.
That's fair. That's fair. That's fair. And then
Oh, yeah.
we were talking about gaming and I the another fighting game that like a lot of these fighting games I would never ever play again for the
Yeah.
record. Like one that really took over my N64 life was Super Smash Brothers 64, which
Yeah.
I guess that's the ST of my N64 era in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
I guess I
that's the
started as a
original
Smash player.
yeah, that's the original Smash Brothers. For a lot of people forget about that one because they
Yeah.
automatically think about the GameCube, right?
Yeah, the GameCube
And
one's the one where the competitive scene really started blossoming. But
yeah, a lot of people forget, like, yeah, it was on the original was on 64.
yeah, and that game was I had no idea about basic fighting game concepts like startup and recovery or anything. I was just, hitting
Yeah.
buttons.
Yep, that was
But
me.
yeah, it was I think that game was fucked up. There's a lot of stuff about that game that you're like, I look back on it now with like a mechanics lens and I'm like, ooh, that was
Yeah.
messed up. Like a lot of anything that Kirby did, and anything that Pikachu did. Like it was just constant hit stop. And so like lock the game up whenever you do like a multi-hit move and you could just stun lock the shit out of people. Um it had a lot of the same like mechanics that Melee was known for. Like it had like the dodge rolling and stuff like that, but it also had like L canceling. Now I'm getting the mechanics stuff because I
Yeah,
know
yeah.
that game pretty well. It's like where you could come down with a button and then uh, hit the L button, which is your trigger button on the N64 controller. Hit the L button to as soon as you land, and you'd have like no recovery. So which is essentially like a Marvel character. There's a
Yeah.
lot like Wolverine dive kick essentially. You could do that with Link.
Oh, man.
Oh, I remember what I wanted to mention before we got away from the 3D fighters was to tie it back to the Arizona community for a little bit. Uh, Around the era when Marvel 3 was big and I was going to casuals regularly, there
Mhm.
was one person that was always trying to like be like, "Can you bring your PS3? Can we get some extra monitors and some extra PS3s?" And it's like we were like setups are kind of hard to find already at the time because we were just getting into like lagless setups like LC like Evo monitor setups, which was the 120 hertz of that time, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, and so, so we were like, why would you want all that extra stuff? And it turns out they really wanted to push Gundam Versus on the PS3, and it had
Oh.
the unique thing where you had the only way you could play the game. There was no split screen on the game. You could only do it by networking the two PS3s together, and they would play over
Oh.
the network, and each person would have their own view of the 3D arena, which is another reason why 3D battlers or 3D arena battlers are hard to uh, incorporate in the fighting game scene, is because you don't
Yeah, you
you
can play
don't
side by side.
yeah, I think Pokken is the only one that does it, and it does it in a jank way. So like a lot of
Oh.
people do like you have to have two systems and two monitors and then two separate play areas for players to play that game. So
Oh, that
it
makes
takes up a
sense.
lot of extra room. It's a lot of extra electronics to buy and stuff like that. But there was a guy in the local scene that was really trying to push Gundam Versus for a while. There's a guy who was trying to push Naruto Ultimate Ninja Storm too. That was one of the shadier TOs that we warned about on previous episodes. But
Yeah. No, that's I mean, like you said, that's more setups, right? Because I mean, if you need 2 PS3s and 2 monitors for one setup, like,
yeah,
that's a TO's nightmare right there. Because that's like that's typically 2 setups for me right there. I could run, 2
yeah,
matches in a bracket right there, and
yeah.
you need that for 1 match? Like, yeah, good
It
luck.
impacts time too, right? Like
Yeah,
now that setup is occupied, and I could, like you said, a setup that would serve two people on a Pokken station now could serve four people on a Street Fighter station.
yep. Oh, man, that sounds like a logistical nightmare. But that game's pretty big because, like, I've seen, like, when I've gone to some of these, like, anime conventions and stuff like that, and they have, like, the cab setup, like, that's one of the games that people are always, like, gravitating to is those twin stick games, that kinda stuff.
Yeah, I mean they're cool and impressive and fun to play. Um,
I think they even do, like, a regular thing at EVO too, like the side events. Or I don't know if it's that exact game, but I always see, like, a Gundam game in their side events.
Oh yeah, yeah. Like there was a Kill la Kill game there, tournament, side tournament there. I always remember like I was going to cheer Scott on for Street Fighter Cross Tekken
Mhm.
one year. It wasn't even this year. It was last year, and I walked by. There's a Kill la Kill setup, and there was a guy who was cosplaying like Kill la Kill. So that like they had the little red streak on their hair, which is a mark that the main character has. So
Ah,
yeah,
well, I mean,
if you can pick a
games.
game, there's a side tournament for it at Evo, man.
Yeah, yeah. That's your game's only dead if nobody's playing it, right? Like, I mean,
Yeah,
if you're the one holding the community up, I mean, more power to you, man. It's just like,
yep.
oh man,
Shout outs to the Cross Tekken scene. They are that game should by all accounts be dead, because
yeah.
nobody played it. It has a really bad reputation,
Yeah.
unfounded in my opinion, and it still is pretty awesome. There are people that chose to go back to that game rather than four, and I thought that was really interesting.
Oh, really? Dang.
Yeah, I'm thinking about like
I think.
Brent.
Yeah.
He's a good example of like a Cali player that just got really good at cross. There's a lot of players that they just learned cross randomly. Um,
Yeah. Well, I mean, sometimes you just find that game that like it just it just I'm trying to think of the word. You just I guess you just kind of mesh with it, or it's just just something
yeah,
you just have fun with. I mean, at the end of the day, it's like if you have fun playing the game, like regardless of how jank it is or how whatever it is, how hard it is, like if you're having fun with it, I mean,
yeah, and
yeah.
fun is like having fun and what people want out of games is like I think when I pick up a game I really like mechanical depth and like
Hmm.
how that plays into like the mind game stuff, but mainly the mechanical depth. Like I like being able to rather than play rock paper scissors with you, I'd like to be able to pull out a different option altogether and surprise you with that,
Yeah.
which is I think that's just a player archetype thing.
You're the guy that
Um,
like plays bomb. Like this isn't a rock. This is a bomb. Like what? It's like we don't have bombs in rock paper scissors,
yeah,
John. Come on.
it's a bomb and it's a bomb and it needs to be diffused and you probably don't know how to diffuse it. It's got a hard counter and you can diffuse it, but good luck diffusing it. That's the style of play that I like, right?
Yeah.
And so I gravitate towards games that have like high combo routability. Like team games in particular have a lot of variance in combo ability because you can just change your team and suddenly all your B and Bs change.
Yeah.
Um, I think that maybe that's the Marvel in me, but I don't want to play a team. I also don't want to learn three characters. So,
Yeah. Yes, I saw something a tweet about something like that recently. Oh, it was regarding KOF
oh
because
yeah,
like I think the idea was like a lot of people want to play KOF, but then the downside is like I don't want to learn three characters. And I think who was it that replied? I think it was James Chen. James Chen was the one that came back and was just like, well, if you think about it, the older games, like the combos weren't as advanced as they are now, right? Like if you look at like what did it start with? KOF 13 with all of those like max cancels and all that stuff, right? Like
yeah,
that to me is intimidating. Like I see that and I'm just like, holy shit, you want me to learn three characters like this, right? Versus playing like ST or even hyper fighting is a more kind of basic fighting game, right? It's like
hmm
learning three characters in hyper fighting and playing that way, like KOF whatever 98 and the games that came out at that time. That's a lot, for me, that's a lot easier to do than to be like, all right, I want you to learn KOF 13, learn all these trials, learn all these max cancels and all this stuff, and I want you to learn that for three characters.
mm.
Like that's very daunting to me. Like, yeah.
I that actually kind of brings up an interesting topic to me. Is do you think that older games are easier or harder than newer games?
Well, I would say like in terms of like the basics and like the controls and like just kind of the the length of combos. I would say they're easier in that sense. Like execution wise, they might not be as easy. Like if I played Marvel, I could do you know I don't know I don't really want to like equate it to like number of hits because that's kind of trivial, right? But it's like,
Sure.
but I could do like launch combos in the super in the DHC into this, right? But and then like in an older game, it might just be something like, all right, well, I just need to do you know, like two mediums and like a special or something like that, right? Or like a low forward super or something like that. And that's a much easier thing in my mind to do. and to kind of learn and build a team around and to to learn all this other stuff. So I'd say
But
like I don't know. I think the execution barrier might be harder just because of like the windows to do things. I think were a lot tighter in some games.
okay.
So like the
Yeah.
input leniency, or I don't know what you'd call that.
Yeah, that's the kicker is do you weigh the ability to execute higher than combo complexity, which is I think what you were
Yeah,
talking about
complexity.
earlier,
It's a
right?
good one. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And because like you hear that discourse all the time on the internet, it's like, oh, older games were harder, right? Back in my day, I had to do 2 quarter circles uphill in the snow, both ways. But like on the flip side, you have people like Scott who are like, no, the newer games are harder because there's so much extra depth to them, right?
yeah,
And I don't actually know where to put that, because I think the old games
yeah,
are hard, but like I think that you're correct in that the characters had less complexity to them. But on
yeah,
the flip side, like they had proximity normals and shit. Like they were complex in different ways, you
yeah.
know?
Yeah, like I feel like they weren't as in depth in terms of like knowing like needing to know like optimal combo routes and stuff like that. A lot of times
Yeah.
it was like this is like your most optimal combo. This is what you should be doing at this time, right? Whereas like I mean, I don't know. Maybe there's more depth to it than that. But like to me, that's on a surface level. That's what I look at. Is like, oh, you do this combo when you jump in or whatever. Whereas now it's like, well, I got to do this, and then I got to figure out like how much meter I have and what's going to give me the best Oki situation, and then all this other stuff.
So that gets me thinking though, like, isn't that stuff still relevant in the old games in its own way?
Yeah.
Like you don't have the drive meter, right? But like even in 5, like I had to worry about like whether or not they had V trigger active, and that changed my BNB, right?
Hmm.
And in I imagine in CVS, like you changed your no, I don't think you did really. It was kind of, I don't know actually. Now I think
I'm
about
not
it.
too well versed in like the CBS games and stuff like that, but I don't know if I'm.
Yeah,
I mean, I know that the Oki and things like that were still obviously still excuse me still present in like the older games, but it's like
sure, yeah,
I guess the way to get there was a lot simpler in some ways.
yeah.
I guess if you want to put it that way.
But there are like little things like hit confirms, right? Like hit confirms are like really important in the modern games, but less so I think in older games. And hit confirming is hard. In
Yeah,
older games, I think you could just do like low forward and fireball, and you do it
yeah,
on block or on hit. It doesn't matter, right? You wouldn't have to like do a
yeah,
bunch of links or a jab like in 4, or like a strong like in 5, or a
yeah,
DRC. You wouldn't have to do all that stuff to figure out if it hits or not. You would just do it,
yeah,
and then it would either hit or not.
yeah. Yeah, there was a lot of safe stuff like that.
Yeah. Do you wonder like, is it really that the games are more deep now, or is it just that information travels more? Like if a game like Third Strike came out today, you know, would we? I don't know. Actually, and I think I'm just kind of blowing smoke. uh, Either way, I think I frequently wonder about whether or not older games were actually harder. And I think executionally where they were, and that almost functions as like an RNG element in a way, because it's
Yeah,
like the combos were so hard that you couldn't do them as consistently, and you couldn't bank on them and build entire strategies around them. You know?
yeah, yeah. It's like I don't know if they're. Yeah, I don't know if games today are necessarily more in depth. I think it's. I don't know. Or I mean, you talk about like information traveling faster. Like I feel like that really helps out in terms of kind of like the game evolving.
Yeah,
Like the game will evolve a lot faster because of that, right? Like people will find something that's really high damage or some kind of setup, and people are like, uh, so I guess it gets implemented into the game faster, and then
yeah,
people obviously have to find counters to it much faster. So like you start seeing like the game itself evolve faster.
yeah. I think by the same notion, I think we might have just figured it out. Like if you if you make if combos are so hard to do that you can't do them consistently, then what's going to happen is you're going to gravitate to the combos that you can do consistently.
Yeah,
And in by that nature, you are just like objectively reducing the amount of options that your character has. You're forcibly simplifying them because the rest of the, like those like one frame super jump cancel links might actually give you the same Oki that like a Street Fighter 5 or 6 would do. Like those all those combo routes might still be there. They just might not be practical. And because they're practical not practical, then it becomes limiting and the character just gets reduced in scope and complexity because you just rule that
Yeah,
option out, right? Maybe
yeah,
that's why people think games are were simpler back then. It's because so much shit was too hard to do that you wouldn't view it
yeah,
as viable, you know?
yeah. Well, I mean, it goes back to that whole thing with like the Sako combos and stuff like that, right? Like,
Yeah.
is this possible? Yes. Is it necessary? For most people, no. Like, it's more of a kind of like a style option, or I can do this kind of thing. Yeah, because like, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think because you think of Sako combos, I always think of four, right? And like the damage scaling in that game was so. Eventually, you got to the point to where it's just like you're just showing off at this point, right?
Yeah.
If you were doing some crazy stuff. Whereas like in the older games, like like if you look at the damage output in some of those older games, like it's ridiculous. Like why are you gonna go for something, you know, that takes this long to do that much damage when I can do the same thing with like what 4 hits or whatever. And it's
Right.
just like you said, like it reduces it down, like your B and Bs and stuff become, pretty much like all you really need,
Yep.
like
And I'm
depending on
like
the game.
the fact that you bring up Sako combos in particular, that's a really good point because Sako the reason well, the original Sako combos, in my understanding, is that they were from Vampire Savior, so the second
Mm,
Darkstalkers, and Sasquatch. There were combos that only Sako could do. Like nobody else could really do them. That's why they started calling them Sako combos because Sasquatch is really hard to play apparently. Um, and so the character might not have been complete, like viewed as a complete character otherwise without those combos. And so it's like Sako strikes me as somebody that was playing Street Fighter 6 before Street Fighter 6 came out. Like as in he's like I'm going to optimize no matter what. Uh
yeah,
and cut through that execution barrier, but to the layman like it we just didn't consider a lot of these options, you know.
yeah.
Even in
I mean, you see,
4 we had a
yeah,
little bit of that, right? So we just wouldn't go for some one framers sometimes,
yeah,
or
yeah.
like
Like
we'd
I
just
mean,
do jab
yeah,
combos, right?
yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, I go back to thinking like, I mean, even today, like you see certain combos, and like usually the first thought is like, one, what's the damage output, and then how much resources did you have to use to do that, right?
Yeah.
Like that's your baseline right there, right? And it's just
Yeah.
like, well, you used all these resources to get that damage. I can do the same thing and use half as much. Yeah, but it doesn't look as cool. But okay, but we're doing the basically the same thing. So unless there's some other kind of advantage I'm getting out of this, like there's not really a big incentive for me to do that.
Yeah. And even then, if someone were to give you that advantage, like like write it down and tell you, like you'd have to weigh that over the risk of dropping it, right?
Yeah,
And
exactly. Yeah,
that advantage might not be big enough. Like, I think that that's what Drive Meter is supposed to emulate in this in 6. It's supposed to emulate an execution barrier that doesn't actually exist because people get mad when there's an execution barrier, you know?
yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, I think it's almost like I find myself doing that a lot too. Like in when I play, like if I go for this combo that I know is like the optimal thing, and then I drop it, the next time I have that opportunity, I might second guess myself, and you know what? Let me do the one that I'm more comfortable doing, even if it does less damage, just because I can consistently hit this one,
Yep.
right? So it's just like, it's one of those things that, obviously that's all happening in real time. I'm not like, hold on, pause here. I think I'll do this right now, right? It's like, oh shit, the
Right.
opportunity's here. Let me do this instead.
I'm gonna stick with the stable one, right? Which is what
Yeah,
you do in the older games, and that's why
yeah,
suddenly I like genuinely think that we might be onto something there as far as like simplicity in older fighting games is more due to the execution barrier rather than design or by
yeah,
design. I think that the characters were designed with a lot of those different options. A lot of them were accidents. Like a lot of that
yeah,
game,
yeah,
those older games just had broken shit because it was easier to release a new version of the game than it was to patch it, you know. Um,
yeah.
but our retroactive look at a retrospective look at older games with the modern game lens. Maybe they have just the same amount of depth. It's just they're too hard.
Yeah. Gotta get those macro controllers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I mean, that makes me think because like I remember a lot of those like combo videos would be like, "This is a tool assisted one," right? And
Yeah,
they'd have
yeah.
one of those like SNES. I don't think it was Mad Cats. Maybe it was a Mad Cats pad or whatever brand it was that you could program macros into. And in terms of like the inputs nowadays, like you don't ever see tool assisted really. It's like you see desk. Like I
Oh,
don't
right,
know
right,
the
right.
last
Combo
time.
videos. Yeah.
Yeah, like nowadays I don't see like I see people doing the combos. It's not like, hey, I need something to help me do this because this is so freaking hard, right? Like this is
Yeah.
basically humanly impossible, like you said. Like the execution barrier is so hard that it's almost impossible for me to do this consistently. So I need the help of this controller or these macros. Whereas
And then
nowadays it's just like, yeah, I could do this.
it kind of reminds me of uh Overwatch of all games.
Oh, really?
Because Overwatch has a character named Soldier 76, and when he
Hmm.
uses his special power, he homes in on everybody, right?
Yeah, yeah,
That's an aimbot. That's like people would hack their games in Counter Strike and then just do make it point to them automatically. They basically just said, "Here's a mechanic that we'll just make it give him an aimbot for his super," right? And that's what auto combos are for fighting games, right? It's like,
yeah,
yeah, people got tired. This shit was too hard to do, so and then people were like making macros instead, where they just had to hit a button over and over again to execute them like a single button.
yeah,
That's what a fucking auto combo is. That's what a target
yeah,
combo is. Like I think the developers figured out that people were doing that. It might not be actually related, but fundamentally, like the ways people got around the execution barrier in fighting games ended up getting canonized into fighting games later on, which is similar to like cancels and stuff like that. That's
yeah.
fascinating.
Oh man.
We're doing like an archaeology dig here, but another example of tool assisted though. You mentioned you don't see it very often, and that caught me off guard because in Street Fighter 6 right now, there's a lot of conversation about cheating, and there are
Mhm.
auto combo macros, and there are auto DIs and auto parries, and we haven't really talked about them on the show yet. And I was curious about like you know we could take a look at it even from the lens of like as when we were kids playing these older games, right? It's like what what constitutes cheating in today's day and age, and then like why are like you don't seem to like the fact that we haven't talked about like these cheaters on Street Fighter 6 up until like the game's been out for 6 months. It kind of shows
Yeah.
to me that it doesn't really we don't really care about that, and I wanted to examine why we don't care about that.
Hmm. I mean, I wouldn't say that I don't care about it. I guess it's because
We're
maybe
not bothered is a better way to
I
put
don't
it.
I don't play in as many online tournaments as a lot of these other players do. And
Yeah,
like, obviously the Capcom Pro Tour, that's been a lot of talk in terms of like the online stuff, right? The online qualifiers and things like that. And I think that's where a lot of the concern stems from, is because this is literally the pathway to a potential $1 million, right? It's not
yeah,
just any old, you know, Tampa Never Sleeps tournament or anything like that, right? Like these are tournaments to potentially get you into a huge tournament. Like that's your ticket into that tournament, which is supposed to be something difficult to do, right? It's not supposed to be something that the normal person should be able to do. So it's like I wouldn't say that I'm unbothered by it. It's just more like it's just I don't know. I guess it's not really on my radar in terms of stuff because that's not where my time is spent. Like my time has been spent just playing ranked and just playing Battle Hub and playing with friends. So like there's not necessarily a concern for that because like I mean, who knows? Maybe I have run into people in rank that are doing that and I just have no clue. But at the end of the
yeah.
day, it's ranked and like, there's a little part of me that wants to win, but then there's a part of me that's just like, I'm just playing other people, right? Like it's not a tournament. So there's the stakes aren't as high.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. You know, like if you were to run into like an auto parry or auto DI kind of person, do you think would you one and done them? Would you play it
Uh
out
I would play it out and I would test everything that I could possibly do. And
just
I'd
to
be
see
like, let
how it
me
works,
see.
right?
Let me
Yeah,
just see. Is he gonna block this? Is he gonna auto parry this? And
Yeah.
like if it's happening consistently, of course I'm gonna like, find those replays and save it and be like, hey, look at this stuff. Like, I can understand blocking like two or three of these or auto parrying this, but like this guy's doing it at like a 90% clip. Like this is, that doesn't happen. Right. Like that's the outlier.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. It's tough. Like, I think
I
that
don't know.
a lot of the cheating that happens too, I think it happens at the diamond and platinum levels and not the master levels. Because a lot of times the people that are like relying on cheats, like they aren't very good and you can kind of just play around it and still win. I don't know
Yeah.
if you found that to be the case.
No, no, no. I just no. So it like I kind of contradicted myself with what I was saying in terms of Street Fighter, right? Because I was just playing ranked, but like I used to play Call of Duty all the time with my friends, right? And there's little exploits here and there. People would like glitch rocks and hide in rocks, right? And like you couldn't see them, like, but they can snipe you through this rock and do some kind of like glitches like that.
Yeah.
But then like yeah, at the same time, like it was almost exactly what you said. Like you would play around that. And like, me and my friends would be like, oh, this idiot's hiding in the rock and like stay away from there. But then we would find ways to like, you know, get to them and eliminate them that way. Or the next time, like we would set a trap or a claymore or whatever near that area. So it's just like, oh, he's gonna run back to that spot.
Yeah, you
Sure
find
enough, oh
counter
look,
strategies.
yeah,
Okay.
look at this idiot. He went back to the same spot, right? So like you find ways to like deal with that. And I mean, in the same token, like I was playing ranked in that, so it's just like I don't know, maybe I weighed that a little differently because like there were easier counters to that than to how am I going to counter somebody in Street Fighter 6 using a bot, right? I really can't, right?
Yeah.
That's a whole different thing
But the
unless I
kicker
find
is that
some
they
kind of
can't
expert.
use the bot 100% of the time, right? If it's just an
Yeah,
anti-parry thing, then you just don't like you don't or you go for throws, right? And if they tech everything,
yeah.
then well, then I guess you're screwed. I don't really know. But the kicker, here's the other side of it, man, is that like people frequently aren't blocking. Like they're busy
Yeah,
committing to buttons all the time, right? Because they're mashing, and so all you have to do is just counter hit them.
yeah,
So you wait for like you basically play like you're playing modern, where you just react to whatever they're doing, or
yeah,
like preemptive react to whatever, like preemptively guess at what they're doing and counter hit their ass. Because
yeah.
most of the cheaters, I think, are just they're mashing and jumping constantly anyway, and
Yeah.
like if you jump at somebody, a bot's not going to save you from getting anti-aired in Street Fighter.
Yeah. I guess I don't know. The thing that like that's always that I've always wondered is just like, yeah, well, if I find out like some kind of like game breaking glitch or something like that, right? Like I might use it once or twice just to kind of test it out and see what kind of stupid stuff I can do, right? But eventually like the novelty of it wears off, right? Like I don't want to keep doing it. Like I don't
Hmm.
like it's not fulfilling, right? Oh yeah,
Yeah,
I got 65 kills without dying, but I was hiding in a rock the whole time, right? Or I auto parried 80% of this guy, or I perfect parried 80% of this guy's approach, but it was the bot doing it. It wasn't really me. Like it's
yeah.
not fulfilling at all, right? Like eventually, like the novelty wears off. So the people that are like consistently doing it, like I always wonder, like, what exactly are they getting out of it? Are they just happy to like screw with people to a certain extent, or what's their mindset?
We like last couple episodes we were kind of talking on a soapbox about like dealing with loss and like having a good attitude and whatnot about like when you approach like practice. And I feel like this is that where like a motivator for somebody to break out these cheats is they just really don't want to lose, you
Yeah,
know.
but see, but again, that goes back to the fulfillment thing because like I've had that happen in like Call of Duty. Like we'd be destroying these guys, right? And the next thing you know, you see, like it didn't happen in like the Xbox, but I remember like on the PlayStation, the older games, like there was a lot of people screwing around. Like I played one time at like uh cousin's house, and like he was like destroying this guy. Next thing you know, this guy's like flying to the level, and I'm like, oh, he activated his cheats. But at the same time, it's like, okay, like I'm losing or he's losing, but I don't know. It doesn't bother me as much. It's just more like, yeah,
Yeah.
I got into your head, and now you're pissed off, and now you got to resort to these tactics. So I ultimately won.
I
right?
mean,
Like you
we're
couldn't
getting
beat
into yeah, we're getting
you
into
couldn't
like
beat me
why do
fair and
we play
square.
video games at all? Because like we're two competitive players trying to break down the minds of why somebody would cheat, right? The fact that we're competitive players in the first place means that we're playing these games for a completely different reason, and that's
Yeah,
I think that like the game naturally segments people out. Like that's another reason why the competitive community hasn't really had to confront cheating for a while because it's like those people like they're in the community but like it's never enough to actually impact the results of a tournament because the people
yeah,
that want the actual like thrill of the tournament uh they're entered the tournament and the people that are cheating are usually not entering the tournament, you know.
exactly. Yeah, but I mean, again, that goes back to where we started with the whole online thing. Those
Yeah,
people aren't going to show up to like Evo or offline majors,
yeah,
but they could potentially enter these World Warrior events and the qualifiers and stuff like that, and cause havoc there.
yeah.
But again, I think it goes back to eventually, like, I don't know, like you can't, like you said, you can't do it 100% of the time, or it's too obvious, and then
Yeah.
eventually it becomes like a kind of a reputation thing, right? Like if Joe Schmo comes out of the woodwork and all of a sudden he's just running through all these like killers that we know of, that's gonna be suspect right off the bat, right? So
Yeah.
it's just like, I mean, I don't know. It's weird because it's like now I'm like thinking like how would you get to the point to where people would actually believe like you're legit? Like you would have to be like playing regularly, maybe enter some events and like, you know, maybe not win outright your first tournament, right? Maybe just sneak in and get a top 16 and then okay, let me tune this a little bit more so I can get a top 8 and kind of make your climb up there. But I was just like, I don't know, that's so much more stuff you'd have to do to even try
Versus
to
just
make
getting good.
yourself legit.
Yeah.
Yeah, versus just playing the game and getting good. Like what why would you go through all of that effort and then
I
potentially be found out?
Well, the kicker is that even say because we talked about this with Scott last week, right? Say you pull this off and you're able to mask the fact that you're cheating, right? And you make it up to the top. People are still going to hate you anyway. We talked about that on the last
Yeah,
episode. Like when you win and it's not the person that everybody wanted to win, then you like
yeah,
people think you're a terrible person. Like
yeah,
they'll think like they'll think Bullhorn from Meta
yep.
RD
Like
like
you're a
that.
fluke.
Yeah, he's a fluke, right? And so it's like if this guy cheats and he does like he wins and he wins with that and people believe it, they're still gonna call it a fluke.
Yeah,
Like you have to consistently win in order to get any kind of cred. And if you
yeah,
consistently win, they're gonna call you out for cheating now too.
yeah. Maybe you just need to be one of those
uh,
guys that just like wins and rides off into the sunset, and then that's it. Like that was the you just left on top, right? And nobody's there to question you ever again.
but then they'll always wonder about that one time. Was it a
Yeah,
fluke? Did they cheat? Yeah.
yeah, man. That makes me think. That makes me go back to So back in Alaska, there was I think this was early, yeah, Marvel 3 vanilla time, right? So nobody really understands anything, or they're just figuring stuff out. Damage output is ridiculous, and at the time we had some forums online, and this guy talked about coming out to the tournament and was kind of talking trash, this and that, right? And he comes out to the tournament and he ends up winning. I forgot who he played. I know Wesker was one of them because he was talking about how his Wesker's. I think one of the quotes that we always remember was like, "Wesker's not cheap. I'm just good with him," right, or something like that.
Why is it always Marvel players that talk about how good they are with a specific character? Like my Wesker, my Dormammu dog, like that kind of shit. Like it's always Marvel players, man. I saw that too when it came out in Phoenix. The same deal. Like just a bunch of random people coming out talking a bunch of shit, and I'm like, who the hell are these people?
Yeah, they just want to be known as that dude that has that good character or the
But we
the
didn't get
best
that with
character.
six. Like even with six, it was like no one talked to me about like bragging about how great they are with a specific character or something. Maybe I
Yeah.
did. Maybe I did. I don't know. But like, I fundamentally
No,
like
maybe it is a Marvel thing because
it's
like yeah,
Marvel, dude.
I do see that for sure. Like, oh, he's got the best Magneto. Like his other two characters are kind of mid, but
Yeah.
whatever. But he's got the best Sentinel or whatever.
And
But
it's also a game that doesn't have a lot of identity because a lot of people play the same shells, you know. So that's what's funny
yeah,
to me.
yeah. Well, anyway, so this guy came out to the tournament.
Right.
He
Yeah.
he ended up winning, and then we never saw him again. Like he never came out to anything else ever again. Like he like abandoned the forums or whatever, and like
Wow.
and like he never came back.
Yeah,
And
he's
I
just
was
like
just like,
he's beaten the game, man. Everybody was too like he was
yeah,
too good for everybody else. That's it.
yeah.
No more.
So just like it was definitely like kind of like a almost like a sore point for some people because they're like, oh no, I'm sure I could beat him now, but he never gave anybody the opportunity again.
Yeah,
So
but
it's like,
those aren't the people that well, I guess now that you're remembering him on the podcast,
yeah,
so
no,
but like
he's a legend in like a notorious way.
we've had a couple of people like that in our local scene that have like shown up and then so there's another side of this, man, and I actually think I've experienced that is that when you're on top, you get scared of losing that position, and then you don't
Hmm.
want to put yourself in a position to lose. Um,
Yeah.
there's I can actually relate to like this kind of sounds a lot like the Republican primary. Not to go into too much politics, but and so yeah, so I I think that there are people out there that they win and they're like they know that they're not going to win again, so they just don't come out, you know. And
Mm,
it's very it's I get that it's like, hey, this person's probably like that's a dick move, and you should come out and give people the opportunity to kick your shit in and get their catharsis.
yeah, yeah,
But it might it comes from a weakness of character, in my opinion, which is kind of judgmental for me to say, but like at least in my eyes, it's like if they don't want to come out and get beat on, then they're not actually interested in improving. They were just interested in getting that one win, and they got the one win, and then everyone's going to move
yeah,
on.
yeah.
Um, the people that are the people that top out in learning games and getting better are the ones that don't pick themselves back up after they lose, and they don't put themselves out there to lose. Um,
Yeah.
and that's a soapbox that I'm once again on. There's a little bit of projection here because I have been on a break competitively too. So I'm kind
Yeah.
of like I think I'm in that boat, right? Where it's like I haven't been putting myself in a position to lose, so I feel like I haven't been getting better. Um,
Mm.
but yeah. Anyway,
That's a good way to look at it. I mean, I don't know, just I know for a long while, yeah, it rubbed people the wrong way, the fact that like he'd never come out again. But I mean, I don't know, because it always comes back to kind of like I don't know, it's the competitor in me. So I would have definitely came back. Even though I think differently because
yeah.
like that very first tournament I went to, like I was happy to get second place. I got bodied in finals and like but I was happy to get second place and I was hungry to go back. And then but like even if I had ended up winning that tournament, I don't think it would have been a matter of like, well, I beat everybody here. I'm too good for them, right? And I don't ever want to come back, right? Or they don't deserve my time kind of thing. Like
Yeah.
I would have definitely came back and I probably would have got humbled just like I got humbled later that year after I got second place and like I was O2ing myself like all the time. So I was like, I probably would have been the same thing, and then like it probably would have eaten at me, but I don't know. It's at the end of the day, it's like I think yeah, it does ultimately come down to like the person and like if you are truly looking to be better and improve at the game, then yeah, you would put yourself out there.
Our
But
friend Mike and Abe, our friends Mike and Abe, I think would say specific. What is it? Specific adaptation to impose demand. Said
mhm,
right. It's that if you don't impose the demand on yourself, which is the risk that you might lose, then you're not actually going to learn how to adapt to anything.
yeah, yeah. I
But
mean, it's true, man. Like you gotta. That's part. I don't know. That's part of fighting games and what's just kept me here for this long. I mean, even if I'm not playing certain games all the time, like yeah, like
it's
if
part of
I
getting
find a
good at
game,
anything, man. Realistically, it's
yeah,
not just like a competitive thing. It's like mastery of anything requires you to fail at it first. And
yeah,
that failure state in a competitive environment means that someone's ego is going to be like someone is going to be better than you. That's the that's so
yeah,
like that's different than like learning to play a musical instrument or something. That is the
yeah,
competitive side. But like it
yeah,
still is ultimately about taking your lumps, whether that's like on the guitar, like if I'm playing learning guitar, then like I'm not going to be able to play the song when I first try it. Like I'm
yeah,
going to mess up, and it's how you like if someone was learning guitar like they learned fighting games, and like like someone loses and they throw their stick, can you imagine like I played the chord wrong and I'm like fuck this and I throw my guitar?
And
Oh man.
that makes me think about like the fact that you were like, yeah, this applies to real life too. It made me think about like my flight lessons because like the first three. So
Yeah.
so I'm through five, right? I've gone through five. The first three I was out flying. The fourth one it was just like a classroom thing.
Yeah,
But the
yeah.
fifth one, like something threw off my routine. Like we didn't get the keys for the plane and everything, and like I was kind of all out of sorts, right? Like doing everything like I would normally do beforehand. And then my instructor comes out and he goes, "Hey, how's it going with all this like pre-flight stuff you're supposed to do?" And my mind's kind of like frazzled because we kind of, we have like these checklist things we got to do, and like, normally you go in sequential order or whatever.
Yeah.
And my mind, like once I got thrown out of my routine, like it kind of messed up everything. Like I wasn't able to compartmentalize like certain things, like do this, and then come back to this. Like, I was fixated on like trying to do the sequence, and when I couldn't do it, like it messed me all
Yeah.
up.
I
And
know
then like
exactly what you're talking about. Yeah,
it ended up like catching up to me later because during our lesson when we're flying, like the certain things I was doing great in, other parts, like I felt like I regressed a lot. And just the feedback he was giving me, he's like, "Oh, you seem like you're rushed. Is everything okay? This and that." And I'm just like, eventually, like I opened up and I was like, "I think it's because of this. What happened at the very beginning? It kind of just threw me off." And he goes, "Well, there you go. That's a lesson to be learned because things aren't always going to go swimmingly for you. During your pre-flight sequence or whatever, right? Something's going to throw a wrench in there, and you're going to be like, ah, shit." And you got to learn to like put that aside and be like, "All right, let me just continue on with what I'm supposed to do."
yeah.
And
That's literally why you're there, right? I've heard from like
yeah,
my friends who are pilots that like the plane flies itself once you take off, right? Like you're not
yeah,
like like my old boss would even like put the visors up on the windshield so he couldn't even see the sky. He would just sit,
yeah,
sit at the cockpit after a while and he just like watch the instruments. So the human is there for when shit goes south and they have to adapt and make a judgment call that the autopilot couldn't, right? And so I think
yeah,
that's what you're practicing more than anything else.
yeah, yeah. I was
I
just
was
like, yeah, just
I was waiting for you to say that your instructor did that to you on purpose or something to deliberately throw you off, you know? Um,
yeah. Honestly, I don't think he did. He looked like legitimately concerned about like the keys missing or whatever, and it
sure.
ended up being the fault of the previous like instructor and student. Like they were lax on a lot of other things that yeah, he wasn't very happy about because he's like one of like the chief pilot guys there. And
Sure.
he's like, "Oh man, I'm gonna have a talk with this previous instructor because like there was a lot of things that were just not supposed to be where the keys
Yeah.
were actually like left in there and they're not supposed to be in there in the plane and all this other stuff." And like, he's like, "Oh man, like this is gonna be a big learning opportunity for them." And it ended up being a big learning opportunity for myself too. And it's just like, but
I already
it's
see
like you
the
said, like I
parallel in
needed to,
fighting games there, man. Like
yeah,
it's like when, if someone's got their flowchart going and then you like disrupt it with some random option that they weren't accounting for and then suddenly
uh-huh,
their flowchart's in shambles. Or
yeah,
like someone drops a combo and then suddenly they aren't able to like recover from that and they take a big risk afterwards
yep,
because they're
yeah,
frustrated
yeah.
they dropped the combo, you know?
See that all the time, yeah. I dropped my game-winning combo. I was like, "Oh, man, I
Yeah.
got knocked down, level 3." Like, I just lost a round, like, "Oh."
That's what we
Yep,
should do for our podcast is just find examples of things that we do in life and then relate it back to fighting games.
yeah. Yeah, you dragon punch through my mix-up? Oh, man, maybe I shouldn't do that anymore. Nah,
Yeah.
nah, 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 nah.
I
I'm
you
going
know,
forward
I've
today.
I've equated some like cuz like you talk about some fighting games being like a conversation, right? Like you're
Mhm,
like, "Oh, how do you react to this mix up? How do you react to that mix up?" And you play against that person that's not thinking and they're just doing
yeah.
stuff. That's the equivalent of like of somebody just like shouting at you.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
what I was gonna say, like, yeah, they're
right?
just yelling at you, and
They don't give a
they
shit
don't
what you're
care.
saying. Yeah.
Yeah, they don't care about what I have to say. This is what's happening, John, alright? We're gonna go do this, and this is what we're gonna do, and it doesn't matter what you think. Like, "What?"
Yep.
Yeah,
That's
it's just like,
exactly
"Alright,
it.
John,
Condor
how do you feel
Spire.
about this? Alright, good block there, buddy." Nah, it's like that's a perfect analogy, man, because that's exactly how I feel when, like, people are just kinda, like, rushing me down, and I'm just like, "It's supposed to be my turn." Like, you were just taking your turn constantly, and, like, I don't
That
know. Those sometimes those are the best games too because like you said, once you interrupt that and you kind of throw everything that they're doing out of the window,
yeah.
then you start seeing like, oh, you don't want to jump anymore. Oh,
Yeah.
you don't want to throw fireballs anymore. Okay,
It's
start
fun
to
because like or like you get that person where they know that you know the counter and they double down anyway because it turns into like a bluffing game where it's like I know that you know but you need to prove it to me and you need to commit to this counter and hope that I do the same thing 3 times in a row, right? And
yeah.
then the conversation happens where you're like, oh, you're talking through the game through these mix ups with each other and you're acknowledging. I don't know. That's the best part of the fighting game to me. Oh
Yeah,
man.
for sure, man. That's how you catch those people that are like doing like unsafe level threes.
Yep. Yep.
Those are the best. I lost a set to this guy the other day, and but like in the middle of it, like the first round, it was like him just kind of rushing me down, right? Second one, I finally slowed down. I stopped pressing buttons because I realized that he was wanting to force his turn, and then I think we were tied in the second game, and I was looking at my life, and he had like no life at all. And I was like, the minute I do something, level three's coming out because he thinks I'm gonna jab or do something right here. And sure
Yeah.
enough, like I think I did like a drill, and then I just like held block, and sure enough, I see Ken level three startup, and I'm like, gotcha. But then
Yeah.
I ended up losing the next round. But I was just like, just that moment in time, I was like, man, it felt so good.
Yeah. When you know the read, and then when you have the read and you're right, and then then your opponent recognizes that you're right, and they freak out about it, or they have some kind of reaction to that, and you're like,
Yeah,
I did that. That's super cool.
yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Well, this has been the Absolute Guard podcast, episode 64, with John and Benny, and I'm saying that after every single one now. You can find us on Twitch at twitch.tv/spiral series, YouTube at youtube.com/spiral series, and on Apple Podcasts and Spotify under Absolute Guard. Any shout outs on the way out here, Benny?
Uh, Man, I'm just grateful to be doing this. It's again, like you said, like we plan around it. It's a part of my routine, so it's like I think I just gotta start doing that with some other things in my life and applying the same kind of thing to that.
I'm doing the same thing, man. And
Yeah,
hopefully that whoever's listening to this podcast, you are also doing that while you listen to us. You don't have
yeah,
to like you can multitask, right?
yeah.
That's the key. The key.
It's not just fighting game lessons. It's real life lessons too. Remember last
Yeah.
time I said like make some new friends. This one,
Yeah.
find
There
some
you
new
go.
friends. That was our lesson last time. This one,
I forgot about that. I haven't listened to our most recent episode yet. We said find some new friends.
yeah,
Oh
because it
man.
was I forgot. Yeah, now I'm thinking about why I said that.
Oh yeah,
Oh,
yeah. It was
it was about expanding like the people that you don't have to be pigeonholed into playing Street Fighter 6. Go play a different game and make some new friends that play other games if you don't like this game.
yeah, like Gundam Versus or the Kill la Kill Arena Battler.
Yeah, find those
Cool.
guys. There's somebody out there that's playing that you'll make a new friend with, and they'll be like, "Hey, I'm not the only one playing this anymore."
We'll call it there. GG's.
Yep.